23 meeting to order at 5 p.m. All board members and student directors are present, except for Director Glowitz, who is at fifth grade camp and joining us via Zoom. So if we see kids in the background, they are indeed having fun. So with that, let's, do I have a motion for the agenda to be established?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor, students?
Aye.
Directors?
Aye.
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 050. And with that, let's quickly move to the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you, President D'Souza. A few things for update here for the board tonight. The first being, we're starting to look really towards enrollment. And as we look towards next year, that class of our fifth graders is still just slightly above 300. So just a reminder that as that group moves up, that eighth grade class is just slightly larger than that. And then our senior class is just slightly larger than that one. So we will continue to see a decline. We're not sure where the kindergarten will be. But again, it's a reminder that, that wave is coming and we kind of are on that last year before we're going to start seeing that decline. So with respect to open enrollment, as that's been discussed, it won't be till next meeting when I kind of bring you what my official recommendation is. But I just wanted to let the board know of things that I'm thinking about and contemplating. The first of which is, we've got so many variables at play. We have certainly our budget. We have our enrollments. We haven't really settled out after COVID. And so trying to think about sustainability and how many variables are we going to add or not add and when to add them. We have not had a robust conversation with the community by and large for a full open enrollment, which gives me great pause about going in that direction. We have kicked around throughout the years around some limited reopen, even with city employees. And so I know we had a conversation, the president and vice president and myself, and kind of thinking about is that an avenue to go? But we also have the long range facility plan. And that's going to impact and really set the tone for what we want out of our facilities and what that's going to mean for capacity and growth or reduction management. So I'm thinking about all of those components as I come into the next meeting with where I think we should be. And I didn't know if there was other inputs that the board thought I should be considering as I am, kind of wading through before I come back to you all.
Yeah, I think the big one is going to be the community input, especially the Long Range Facilities Planning Commission. So that I think is most relevant.
Is that something that's ever been considered before, the idea of city employees being able to enroll their kids, or is that something that other districts have done?
I don't know if other districts have done it. It has been considered in our district a couple of times. Right now, Youth and Family Services counselors, since they're in our buildings full time, they are the one exempt group. Outside of that, it hasn't extended to the rest of the city. The city has come to us in the past and had conversations, certainly with me, and I assume they probably had them with Donna, perhaps even Gary before that. But they have an interest because it would be another way to attract and retain employees on their side. And it's kind of a benefit that they would have. We could potentially have an interest if it were to garner some students. We're probably talking less than 10, that we're really honestly talking about, but it could potentially be another way of partnership. So that's that.
Thank you.
I'm surprised we don't already do it. It just makes sense that they're part of our community, that should be something that should be a given. If they're gonna come work here, that their kids should be on the island, as well. So I'm glad we're talking about it now.
Dan?
Yeah, I think that one of the data points that would be useful is to look at districts that have done open enrollment in significant numbers, such as Vashon Island, which Matt should be familiar with, and what that looks like in terms of the yield for diversity, and then what impact it has had for those districts financially. But whether or not, you know, what the outcome has been for those districts that have decided that it was in the interest of the community to go down that path.
Andrew, Asher?
I agree with what Dan said. It would be interesting to see. I don't know what other districts have looked like with the open enrollment.
I agree, cost benefits.
Also, just to clarify, because I remember you guys had some questions the last time this topic came up, that if we do any kind of even limited open enrollment, those kids can attend Mercer Island School District until the end of their school career. It would be something like if we change our policy to those years later, they're grandfathered in.
Yeah, it would be within, you know, we'd be rewriting policy, and so those would all be factors as we look at that, so.
I mean, while we're looking at it, I mean, you know, it's kind of a slippery slope. I know business owners on the island have always wanted, not always wanted, but you know, there's been a push for maybe using addresses of businesses rather than residences. So I'm not suggesting that we open that door. I'm just saying, I think that's another consideration.
And that could be part of that community conversation when we're talking largely, because the clergy has been another group I've talked to as recently as this past fall, with some of them who have children but don't live on the island either. So.
And I think there's also been continuity interests. Even if someone decides to take a job elsewhere, once their children have started in that school district, can they continue or not? Or even the last 1 or 2 years of school, so they're at a better transition time as well. So, yeah.
So I'll come to you next week, or excuse me, in 2 weeks, with that update. I wanted to kind of put out there publicly, though, we'll be sharing it even more publicly, and I had given you a update on it in a recent board update, but we will be moving to a 1-to-1 laptop at the high school with our students starting next year. We know we have community members who are going to be interested in that because they might be contemplating devices for their children. So we don't want to wait until May to make that announcement. Again, our tech levy, which we're entering into the first year of our 6-year cycle, is the contributor and what makes that happen. So the feedback, and I think Andrew, I believe you participated in there. Asha, did you as well?
Yes.
Great. You want to talk a little bit, just briefly, about the process that you participated in that our team had set up?
Yeah, yeah, students had 10 or 11 devices that they got to test. I'm looking at our instructional coach to make sure I got the right number, and we got to use the devices for the day and just test it out. And then at the end of the day, you know, we would write what the pros were, what the cons were, and they were asked, you know, well, how does Schoology work on this? How does printing? How does world language and math, to really try and get the most versatile device. And I think there were like 30 to 40 students that participated and tested it out. So I thought it was a really good process, and I think I liked the range of devices that were put out there.
Great. So more information coming, but I think we're excited. It's been a response to what our students have been talking about and our staff suggesting what do they need more capability out of for the students in their courses. So and then just legislatively, it looks, I am scrambling to get updates, and probably tomorrow I'll get a lot more, but that House Bill 1244 with regard to the per pupil limit on the EP&O levy didn't make it out of rules. And so I think that one is falling off, unfortunately, right now. I was in contact with Jennifer Flood through email today through the PTA, our PTA advocates and others. And so I've got calls into others trying to figure out where that is, but it got stuck in rules and and it doesn't look like it got out. So I'll have some other updates there, but I'm extremely disappointed in that news that's come out just recently.
Yeah, Jennifer done a big push to advocate and get all the PTAs to support the bill. A number of emails went out to a long list of legislators to try and make this happen. We got some good responses in. But it looks like, so it's my hearing the news too, that it's stuck there, so it's too bad. Hopefully we can change some minds around that, that's kind of the most important thing we could do. Next to the special ed bill, which is still hearing.
Not very well.
Not yet.
It's
It's pretty.
not in the form we
it's
wanted,
pretty-
But pretty low.
It's not gonna,
move the needle.
No.
So I have other things, but they're gonna be part of the meeting, and those were the standalones.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, let's go to fundamental 3, 2A.
Great, I'm gonna bring up Dr. Booby, who's been leading the charge on this, and we have members from our school teams who are here. As they're getting settled there, just as a reminder on our fundamental, this is really developing self-awareness, empathy, emotional, social intelligence, responsible decision-making, and citizenship. And I think the timing of this is excellent. I had an opportunity, and I think some who are in this room had the opportunity last night to attend the Parent Edge event. And I think Principal Christensen was at the midday event on the elementary focus, and then last night was more middle and high school. But some takeaways high level on that before I kind of move it over. Just some sad news in the world is Dr. Sunia Luthar, who we've had a partnership over the last decade plus with Authentic Connections. She passed away in February, and so I just learned that in the last week or so. She had a short battle with an ailment, but the good news is her daughter continues at the helm of that organization. And so that great work will continue. But I remember some of the things that she talked to us about, that, you know, stress and poverty were major impacts on the development of the brain for our youth. And thinking about that last night, they were mentioning discrimination, poverty, trauma, and pressure. Those are the 4 biggest impacts on our youth today when it comes to really creating high levels of stress, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and then you know, ultimately changing the brain itself. And that a couple other things is that when students have been surveyed, and one of our school improvement plan goals in our schools, certainly at our high school, has been who's that key adult in their life. And through the research that they were sharing last night, when they've talked to students about, you know, what is it about that adult that makes them critical, 2 words emerged: empathy and validation. And that we have showed that empathy and validation, and I think that hooks into our B's and some of the other components that that's really centered. So with that, I'll turn it over to our team. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Well, you took most of my introduction, so thank you, Fred.
Now, keep going.
So I will just highlight that, you know, we do have the survey that you see up here. And then just note that most of our parents and students should be taking it right now. So that's why there's a blank column of data. And the data that you see up here is what was presented last year, because we presented it after the data was gathered for the 21-22 school year. So that's currently out, and we look forward to analyzing that when the data comes in by the end of the month. And with that, we have a lot of great work happening in each of our buildings. So I will start with elementary, Heidi.
All right, well, hi, everyone. Yeah, and I got the opportunity, really pleasure to go see that self-directed child presentation during the day yesterday, and there are a few other administrators there. It was phenomenal, and I've been recommending it to my whole staff because one of our focuses for the last couple of years is student-led, shifting to student-led, everything, students owning their own learning. And I felt like through the whole presentation, you could have replaced teacher when they said parent, And you could have replaced student when they said child and school when they said home. I just thought it was such a complimentary message. So thank you for that opportunity, Fred. You let me go.
No.
So thanks to the Parent Edge, absolutely. So I'm really grateful for that. And I do think it has a lot of, I haven't had time to mull on all of that information yet for tonight's presentation, but I do want to just open with, really the themes in this fundamental, they're hard to compartmentalize and take as discrete themes because just about everything we do in elementary schools weaves all of these together. And that's our outcome, our goal for everything we do. So tonight, and oh, by the way, I'm here representing all 4 buildings because 2 of our principals are at camp with Director Lois at Cedar Springs tonight, and the other one is not available this evening. So the one thing I wanted to start with and call out for all of you from this year's report is the increased emphasis on restorative practices across all 4 buildings this year. And, part of restorative practices is PALS coach. Have you guys, I know we've reported on PALS coaches and PBISs for quite a few years, but that PALS coach really becomes that key adult that Fred was just talking about for our students and helps kids to rebuild and reconnect with their community at large, which is a restorative restorative practice. This year, but we all sent small teams of people to a restorative conference in the fall, and then those teams brought that back to each one of our buildings, and West Mercer in particular. They trained up their entire staff this year on a restorative practice called community circles. And that's just it. Those community circles can look a lot of different ways, but what they teach the kids is how to be accountable for the behavior and make reparations, make apologies, authentic apologies, that kind of thing. But then also accept apologies and accept reparations with their community. Then the Westminster team also provided a training to a mini workshop twice this year to staff and paraeducators across the district that got really rave reviews, and they brought it back to our buildings. And we have these restorative circles going on in big and small ways across all the buildings, in general education classrooms, in lunch bunches with our Mercer Island Youth and Family Services counseling staff. We have a variety of peer mentors, mediators, recess ambassadors that are going on, all of which are restorative practices. We have a variety of actually restorative recess practices, in particular, things like buddy benches, along with those recess ambassadors that I just mentioned. We have some structured and guided alternatives to recess, kind of safe spaces for kids to go with recess, because recess really for an elementary kid, it's the most unstructured, difficult social environment that they encounter all day long. So, I know sometimes it can feel like, why are you highlighting recesses? Kind of they're just out there playing, but that's really the most representative of the society that they're going to have to move through and navigate on their own. So we focused in on that. We also have buddy classrooms, which is typically an older, younger type of partnership, and they go out and do some games at recess together, and the older kids teach the younger kids how to navigate that and go through the problem solving on their own. So at Lake Ridge, I'm really proud of, we've developed a Lions Pride Student Center this year, and it's just staffed by our PALS person. We don't call it a PALS person there at Lake Ridge, but it's just building a kind of complementary to our counseling office, a space where kids can self-select to come in and get guided support in problem solving on their own, having restorative conversations with one another. So, and then I could go on. I've already mentioned PALS and PBIS, but you can read it for yourself, and I'm going to end. Is that 5 minutes? see the nods. I'm representing 4 buildings. 7 minutes.
Middle next.
Middle school.
Good evening. Thanks for having us here tonight. I know you have in front of you a robust 24-page document about all this stuff, and I'm actually gonna talk something about the middle school that's not even in this document today. And I think it's I think when we talk about fundamental 3 and SEL and decision-making, making connections, I think we talk a lot of times about what happens in the class and within the school day. But I also think all the levels understand the importance of co and extracurricular activities and how that can provide kids those opportunities. So I just wanted to come to you tonight and highlight some things we're proud of at IMS in terms of expanding our co and extracurricular opportunities. This past couple of years, I think I've said at a board meeting before, I really feel like since we're now back fully from COVID, there's been a renewed interest in, and I think all levels around kids making connections to school and staying for after school activities and wanting to have that opportunity to explore an area of interest, an area of passion with their teachers, but also with their friends. And so we've really seen at IMS a large increase in the number of kids who are benefiting from after school club sports and activities. I think that we've probably almost doubled our offerings in terms of clubs and activities, and they're about all kinds of things. There's sort of the co and extracurricular opportunities that kind of support the curriculum, the robotics, the programming, the math club, things like that. There's also just the fun ones. We have a new baking club. We have a softball club that had just started. We have ultimate frisbee. One of the high school students, I think as part of a project they're doing, is coming down and working with some of our students around how to do Rubik's Cubes faster. And so it doesn't have to have anything to do with anything that might make them better at school, but it's an area of passion and interest. And I give kudos to our staff who are advising the clubs. I give kudos to our students who are seeking out those opportunities. I give a lot of credit to the high school because we've modeled some of the things that we're doing based on what they've been doing for a while now. For example, their Jewish student union and their Black student union, we're starting up middle school cohorts of that and really tapped into the expertise of the high school about what's made them successful. Finally, we also just have established clubs that have happened in the past that we know not only are great for kids, but in terms of connections, but also decision-making, also academics such as DI, which has been it's all in all the levels, and kids really excel in that. And it supports the learning that they do in school. So I'm just really proud of that. As I walked out of school today, kids were leaving, coming back off the fields from softball club, from ultimate frisbee, lots of different activities. Our Dungeons and Dragons club is probably our biggest club that we have. And I will tell you that 5 years ago, we didn't have a Dungeons and Dragons club. But a kid said, one of our staff members, I would like to start this. And the staff member became the advisor, and now it's one of our most sought after clubs. So as we're talking about making connections, sort of the 4 Bs, all those things we want from our kids, I think it's important that we realize that not only does at IMS from 8:20 to 2:50, not only that's important time, but also from 2:50 to 4 o'clock is just as valuable for our kids. So we appreciate the support that we get from the district level in terms of providing stipends for our staff, our ASB, our PTSA, lots of different groups. So I'm just really excited about that, and I think it's benefiting our kids.
In the high school?
And thanks, Aaron, for drawing some parallels to both of our levels and the kind of work that we continue to do together. So I appreciate you mentioning that. We've loaded the fundamental 3 with a lot of things from the high school. So I know out of the 24 pages, quite a few of those pages are from us. We're very proud of the work that we're doing at the high school. But I know Lisa wanted to start with a testimonial that she got a chance to receive recently.
Yeah, well, I would agree. I think all of us, we love coming and talking about fundamental 3. It's really the core of everything that we do. I agree with Heidi. You just cannot compartmentalize this work. And I'll share a story in just a moment. I just think we're crushing it in this area, and we just continue to focus on it. Our our kids are telling us, you know, that they need a place that they feel connected, that they feel safe. And our school improvement plan, we really focused on that this year. We're not just waiting for the EES survey data to come out. We've been kind of polling our kids, surveying our kids throughout the year. Our numbers are increasing every time. Our students are definitely feeling connected to school. And so one of the things when we're, you know, just talking about the developing a self-awareness and empathy and so forth, you know, we have a very focused intention on this work. And so for the most part, our kids are, as I said, they're doing really well in this area. We do have times though where they're kids and they're learning, they're continuing to learn. And I just today spoke with a parent who, again, in an unstructured time at elementary, it's recess. At high school, it's lunch. And so there's just some unkind things that are happening at lunch, and was able to talk with the student yesterday at length, almost an hour, and was able to talk about some shared experiences that we've had this year through our assemblies and through our Islander Hour, and just helping him kind of see the self-awareness and really have that empathy then for another student to step into their shoes, and then be responsible and looking at the decisions that were made and how can I make better decisions moving forward. And then just to be a better citizen in the school, because we're always talking to kids about how can I be an ally. And so it was a really powerful conversation. I didn't really have an hour, but like you could just see the needle for the kid. It was moving, and it's because of the work that we've laid. And then when the rubber hits the road, it's like, oh, we've got some traction here, right? That we can really move with it. And when I called home, his parents said, thank you for so much for, you know, talking to my student, talking with me, but they noticed the intentionality of the work that we're doing, right? That we really want kids to feel connected. All of the work that we're doing in Islander Hour, even within the classrooms that they're reading in social studies and English, it just is helping kids. And she was just like, thank you so much for this work, because this is the work that our kids need in the world that they're navigating. So I just couldn't be happier. I always kind of shove Nick and Erica out of the way, and I'm like, I'm going to write this report through our staff is incredible. You know, we don't do this work. Our staff is doing this work, our students are doing this work, and it's just an honor to pull it all together and just really highlight the exceptional things that we're doing at the high school and certainly throughout the district.
Two specific things that I wanted to highlight. Fundamental 3 talks about self-awareness and responsible decision making. Two areas I wanted to talk about were just at Crest. We see in our student-led conferences at Crest, I'd love to be able to bottle up both these things I'm going to talk about and try and bring it more onto our main campus. But it's students having ownership for their learning and get a chance to lead their families who come in for student-led conferences, as well as the educators, even administrators, counselors that get a chance to participate in student-led conferences. There's no better example of self-awareness and decision-making when it comes to leading your parents through your academic growth in the classroom. So it's a beautiful experience that Crest has all of their students go through. And the other one I thought was really an interesting approach that they've taken on this year. They've seen a drastic decrease in late work throughout the course of this year, because they've implemented a Google form that the students has the grace to turn in something late if they complete this Google form. But once they complete it, it goes to their educators and it goes to their parents. And so there's some incentive there for the students to say, well, I'd rather get my work in as opposed to maybe creating this. But also it was a creative tech tool working with our instructional technology coaches, but also students being accountable for their learning and being responsible for their learning and using the tech tools that we have at our disposal. They've seen a drastic decrease in late work. And I just thought it was innovative by our Crest Learning team.
So let's open it up to questions and conversation.
Questions, students?
I just had a comment, not a question. It's a year and a half ago, I had a parent reach out to me who was moving from a different city and they had bought a house on Mercer Island and she was like, we're thinking we're gonna wait, we're gonna rent the house for a year, we'll move our kid to school in sixth grade. When she starts sixth grade, she's very shy. We're worried it would be hard for her to come in fifth grade. And I really, really encouraged them to move for fifth grade because I was like, she'll know somebody when she starts middle school. So I just out of the blue today got a message from a parent. She's at Lake Ridge. She's having a fabulous time. She was just in the musical. And the parent was like, thank you so much. My kid is super involved in school. She's made so many friends and she's very excited about the middle school. And actually, I'm excited about the middle school. I want to enroll now.
We don't allow that. We don't allow that.
It was so nice hearing that they had had such a positive experience as newcomers and that like they could already see as a family, like the continuity of moving on to the middle school, to the high school. So thank you for everything.
It is an interesting thought though, is thinking about your initial thoughts about enrollment and things like that, is we do see a big spike in enrollment at IMS between 5 and 6. But there is something to be said about enrolling in fifth grade.
Yes.
And getting to know some people at a school,
that's our
4
advice
schools combined.
often,
Yeah.
But
is let us have them.
Yeah.
Build some community and
Yeah.
then we'll send them off with
Yeah.
a group.
Yeah,
You're saying,
You know,
so
with the
instead of
connections.
waiting until sixth, when the transition happens to.
Right.
fifth
right,
grade,
because in sixth grade, you get 4 schools coming together. And everybody's kind of trying to figure out where they fit. Where if you would come in fifth grade, you would know a quarter of the kids coming in already. So it just, I don't know how we would ever make that change, but it is an interesting thought. Because we do see, and we actually plan for the increased enrollment from fifth grade to sixth grade, because that's when it tends to happen.
Because people are waiting for that.
For a logical break.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do a lot of just meetings with parents interested in that same question that you just mentioned. And I do oftentimes encourage them to give us the kids now. We'll build some community for them to go over to the big place, because sometimes middle school's scary.
Every day.
Going along with what Maggie said, I have a personal experience where a family just came to Mercer Island and they also said that they felt very welcome and their student really transitioned well into the middle school. And so we are doing a lot of great stuff. And obviously, wherever you go in all of the schools, you see there's tons of activities, right? It's popping, like yesterday, Northwood had a wonderful event and I just love seeing all the communities out there. And then when you go to the high school and you see every single time I go to a high school event, I film it, I send it to other folks. I'm like, don't you wish your high school? And so I totally see all the amazing things that we're doing, and it is a lot of work, right? Beyond just the classroom work and doing this. And then, then I see the qualitative data, right? And so this is not a critique of the staff and administration at all, in the sense where, because I totally see it, my kids totally see it, they love it. But then if we look at the data, right, and this is totally like also COVID related data, we have to recognize that it's kind of, we don't know how to take this, but if we look at like even 17, 18, 19, you know, as a system, I don't think we need to talk more about how do we have a more rigorous benchmarking of how do we intentionally, you know, what is good and what is bad for us, right? So that we can, because when we see all the wonderful things, we can feel that we can see it's good, but obviously there's a group of students who aren't feeling that. And so that makes me think about in the last 5 years, how maybe Mercer Island School District, the demographic of students have changed. And all the things that my kids may enjoy and really loving may not be the similar things that maybe the new demographic of students are enjoying and loving, right? And so as we're presenting all this, you know, what are activities, initiatives that we're doing for all, then intentionally what are, like, I'm hearing in the middle school, like our Jewish clubs, our Black Student Union clubs. And those are kind of things that I think about when we create new clubs and new activities. Maybe there are a certain portion of the community that isn't feeling this. And so I'm glad that we are seeing the clarity, we're seeing where the gaps are and putting a lot of energy into this. Because obviously our data is showing that we are failing some of our students, right, just on this. And so kind of as we're thinking about needs, where we're going to, so I'm glad to see some of these work happening of intentionally, not just for all, but then also like really be really intentional in our programming to meet the new kind of, because new generation of students and have different needs and likes, right? So I'm just kind of putting out there that we encourage us all to continually think about who is responding to this and not having the same experience as like my kids are having. Right, but it is kind of a whole district wide, so not a critique to you all, because whenever I'm out there, I'm just overwhelmed by all the activities. You know, I just took my cousins who are from Idaho, they could do visit college, and they're like, our school is never this fun, right? And so they feel it. So I kudos to you all and putting so much effort and work into not in the classroom, but also extending outside the classroom work. But we still need to do a lot of, I think, work here based on the data.
I was gonna just say that I'm gonna toot the high school's horn for a second. One of the things that as we were trying to figure out where the gaps were, we actually went on the website and noticed all of the, I don't know what you, equity-based groups you guys have outside as clubs, and I was just amazed by how many different groups you guys are trying to work with. And so that kind of spurred us to say, well, we can do more at our level. And so I wanted to say, I appreciate you guys. It was a list of, I don't know, 10, 12, 14, it seemed like. So I think the work is being done, but I do think we need to continue to figure out who we missing.
So all of the caveats that have been said and all of the praise, absolutely. These numbers really worry me, and I know they worry everybody. We see it, we hear about it all the time, we know what's happening with our kids. I think there's phenomenal work being done, and I'm so grateful for that. I just wonder, you know, what else can we be doing? And one thing that's, I was gonna actually bring this up to Dr. Rundle at some point in conversation, but one thing that's really been intriguing me lately is this Science of Happiness course that started at Yale, and now they have it for teens. And you know, basically for those who don't know what it is, it's basically a mindful class where they're really working on, you know, seeing the positives in your life, being grateful for them, having time for meditation and connection. That's this specific time, and they get credit for it. I mean, it's not a ton of credits, but they get credit for it. It's a class and an academic class, so they're required to be there. They're required to participate. You could just Google Yale Science of Happiness and read more about it, than do a better job explaining it than I am. But you know, I mean, I know we have Islander Hour, I know we have Gator Time. I just wonder how much more intentional we need to be based on what's happening with our kids right now. And I would love to see, I know a lot of teenagers roll their eyes at this, but one of the statistics that I saw recently was with regards to social media, that when they took a course like this and they were made aware of the social media and the other activities that they could do, like other hobbies they can pick up, they're like, this statistic was like, it went from 7 hours a day, something like crazy, being on social media, to 1 hour a day. And that was just because, you know, we all are kids of the, you know, 80s, 90s, whatever. We went outside to play, or, you know, that's just not the norm anymore. We had to find something to do because there wasn't electronics. And so it was, you know, and then you've got the benefit of pulling off of social media, which is causing a lot of the damage as well. So things like that, I'm just wondering, I know Islander Hours once a week. I know can't remember how much, 4 days, Gator Time's 4 days a week. I know kids really want their homework time, which it alleviates a big stress too, and that's really important. But whether or not we can make a course or health, or, I mean, I just really think that we need to be intentional about this. And I think, you know, especially with our 7-period day, most high schoolers have a little bit of wiggle room in their schedules and take electives, you know, hey, if we can make it a science or a social science credit, do a credit, awesome. But there's curriculums out there and I would just love to see this, you know, intentional, I feel like it could really hit a lot of the kids that, you know, I don't like to see it as we're failing kids and I know you don't mean that, but you know, which kids aren't we helping? Because I don't, you know, I just look at it as, I don't think the schools are causing the harm. I think that there's a lot of things causing the harm and we're really helping a lot of kids, but there's a lot of kids that we're not helping. And I worry that a lot of the kids who slip through the cracks aren't gonna have either the motivation or the know-how to go out and seek it. And, you know, are scared of joining a club or scared to go to a lunch buddy thing or scared to sit on a bench. But if they're in a class where they've got this little community and making it, you know, it's kind of much more of a forced thing, but you know, it's a positive thing too. So anyways, just throwing that out there because I really, really worry when I was reading these numbers and just knowing what's happening out there. I know the phenomenal work that's happening and I don't question that for a second. I think it's the state of the world right now, which is why the numbers went down with COVID. That's my impression. But anyways, just throwing this out there that I personally, it's not a board directive, would love to see intentional work. You know, I mean, forcing our kids to make good choices and have that time to be aware of it. Forcing them to have the opportunity to learn about making good choices.
And I also think just everyone has to keep in mind that kids that are, okay, like my kid who is now in 5th grade, right? Like spent, you know, half of 1st grade and all of 2nd grade in a really unusual situation where all the normal activities weren't there. So when I might have been sending them to like soccer practice and dance class or whatever, like those opportunities just weren't there. And there wasn't a lot of casual socialization, like run to your friend's house kind of thing either. So I think you're exactly right when you say that the kids are really craving that now, like that social connection and those structured activities. But it also means that during that critical period of development, they did not have those social experiences, right? So that's something that they're going to carry going forward into high school. And so those are maybe going to be kids that you get in a few more years' time at the high school who maybe don't have the finest tuned social interaction skills, you know. So,
Dan has a question.
Yeah, can you hear me all right? The big HVAC fan just went on. So,
We got you.
So echoing what Deborah and Tam said, you know, I'm encouraged by a lot of the qualitative data. Through my son, I am familiar with the D&D club, which he's very passionate about. The radio broadcast does phenomenal work. But in looking at the quantitative data, as both, you know, Tam and Deborah have said, I mean, the trends are discouraging, and it's, you know, difficult to say what is just the world around us and where aspects that, you know, we can try to lean into. And so I guess to that, it may be a question more for Fred. When it comes to the EES survey data, is that given those questions in other districts? If so, can we compare to sort of, you know, see what may be working well in other districts? And if not, has there been any discussion of regional data around social emotional so we can use the school districts as a laboratory as we're working through how best to equip students to deal with the world in which they live, both internationally, technologically, everything, what the best approaches are?
Couple different answers or a few different tentacles to those questions. One is yes, we do have access and to take a look at what are they seeing not only regionally but nationally as the educational effectiveness survey is given out. And so, you know, I think one of the pins we should put in this is once we get our information back from the current school year, which as Director Boobie mentioned is happening right now. Once we get that back, perhaps bringing this back just for an update for the board and for the community to see, because there was regression and we took a look at it with our student advisory group 2 meetings ago. Was that? So 2 meetings ago, and we had a conversation with that group around, you know, what does this information mean and what are they noticing? That regression from 1920, when they took it in 21-22, we're really interested to see what's going to happen with 22-23. And absolutely, they have a lot more capability, and Director Williams has been working with the Center for Educational Effectiveness with their newer tools, so that we can compare ourselves. And then as I look in the room here, we have the president of the association, Sally Lozier. We were at a meeting yesterday for our CCS group. And one of the suggestions was potentially coming back at our next meeting and actually looking at the Healthy Youth Survey information, since all districts use that, and starting to have some conversations in the CCS about this as well, since our districts tend to be pretty similar.
Students, any questions come to mind now?
I just, you know, it's something that we can, you know, we'll never probably ever have a, you know, hope for 100%, but we can work to do as much as possible to get 100%. So I agree that, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and the numbers are lower than what they were before. You know, we were away from school, but I do appreciate the care that teachers and staff have given, a lot of extra time, even extra time out of school and after school, for these clubs. And I agree that students really want to be back and want to go back, but there is a lot of students who maybe still feel like they aren't, they don't have their place. And it's something that, as you can read and hear, that I know the middle school leadership is trying to do, and the high school leadership is trying to do, and these clubs are trying to do. To Deborah's point, I think it's a really interesting idea about the mindfulness class. I do worry about, you know, adding another class for students to take could have, as, you know,
No.
back, yeah. That is, you know, then you also look at, you know, there's a lot of stress when it comes to high school and performing well, and you're, you know, have to take a lot of different classes. There's added stress to that. So I think it would be, as Dan said, to look at, you know, the 22-23 data and then compare it to other districts. If it's, you know, somewhere that happens, you know, across the nation, that's one thing. If it's, you know, impacting us more or less, then I think that's a conversation we should really look at. And, you know, it's, the other part too is the actual survey. Students get surveyed a lot, a lot. So it is something that it's like, no more surveys from students, and they're really useful, but students get really surveyed out by this time of the year, and it's really important to look at. But I also, you know, students get, I think, tired, and I bet as the year goes on, less students participate in surveys and take them less seriously. So that's something that, you know, if students have to take a 30-minute survey or could skip it and do 30 minutes of homework, you can decide, you know which one the student's going to do. So I think that's another important point to look at too, is the year goes on and the more surveys go, the maybe more inaccurate they might get.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of echo what Andrew said. Like, I can't say I'm surprised that the data went down for 21-22. Like, you can kind of feel it in the student body. There's just less connections because you connect out, but it does gonna take 2 more years to connect back in. Especially because we had masks last year, and it may seem like small, but it is a big deal to be face to face with your teachers. So be interesting to see what it is this year.
That course that you're mentioning, Director Lurie, it was brought up last night, and perhaps they spoke about it during the midday presentation. The professor who built that class, she embedded herself into the student body and lived in one of the housing unit. You know, I don't know if it was a dorm, but she lived with students. And she couldn't believe how sad the students were. These were college students who were at Yale. They should have been happy. They're only sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night. And she couldn't believe. So that's when she built the class, and it became, I think, the most popular course at Yale, and went on. But they talked about that last night at the presentation. So
Okay, thank you very much. With that, could I have a motion to find the superintendent in compliance with Fundamental 3?
So moved.
And a second,
Seconded.
thank you. All in favor, students?
Aye.
And the directors? Aye. With that, we find the superintendent in compliance 2050. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you, team. And thanks to all the team behind you at the schools, some who are here tonight, for making that happen.
Okay, should we move on to 2B? Yes. Okay, 2B, governing style, level 1 monitoring of the board policy 1002. This is monitoring of the board. Do we want to step through these? How do we, or do we want to work through this in one go? So I would there is on March 16th, a candidate forum for people who are thinking about running for school board. This policy and the next policy are two recommended policies for candidates to read. They're very important and representative of the board duties. So highly recommend them. But so hearing no suggestion, could I have a motion that the board in compliance of governing style for governing style self-evaluation?
I move that we find the board in compliance with board policy 1002 governing style. Or, yeah, the board in compliance.
Seconded.
Okay. And with that, all in favor, students?
Aye.
Directors?
Aye.
Aye. And any nays? With that, we are in compliance 2050. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Again, recommend any candidates to look at this one as well. This is board policy 1003, board job description. So this covers the description of what the duties of individual board members and how we work as a group. And again, could I have a motion to find the board in compliance of 1003?
I move that we find the board in compliance with board policy 1003.
And a second? Okay, with that, any discussion involved?
I just want to say that, you know, we've had some really difficult discussions in the last couple of years, and just to always remind ourselves that, you know, when we're a board, we speak as one, based on decisions that we've made. And also that, you know, words that we say really do have an impact on people. And just that reminder is always really important. I also think, yeah, I think things have gotten better as we've moved out of COVID, but just a reminder of where policy and operations meet and staying in our lane, so to speak. So I just think those are consistent reminders that we all need to give ourselves.
Yeah, any other thoughts from board members,
No, I very much agree with that.
students? I think this is a great board policy for any candidates to look at. As a board, we work in collaboration with each other, the district, and the community as well. And we take votes clearly, as you see. 3 of 5 board members make a decision, and that's how we move forward around this. So individual board members have opinions. We certainly love to do dialogues and with our community, with our staff, with our, yeah, with anyone involved. But then decisions are made upon 3 out of 5 board members working together. The other thing that's key here is this is about all students, not just individual students. And that's the level we tend to work at too. More discussion around this, March 16th, 12 o'clock. Any candidates interested in running for school board?
And then March 23rd at 5 o'clock, another one.
There we go. Thank you. With
I do want to also make a comment since, right, you know, this, the board and superintendent relationship. I think when we talk about kind of our board governance process and when we talk so much about kind of where's that line between what we do and what the superintendent does. And I don't think we ever come to, you know, it's kind of a relationship, right? It's like if people have to figure out where that is. So there is no definite line, but I really appreciate you for that. Part of it is like, we are thought partners and representative of the community and kind of contributing to kind of how we see things, but how people may take that as a directive or not is really also the recipient, like, you know, if you as a superintendent. And it could be totally like, did you tell me to do that? Or it could be just like, hey, thanks for your thoughts, right? And so I have to appreciate that relationship. And so, because sometimes when we get so definitive, it actually makes it hard for us to do the work. And so it has been, I do agree, you know, it has been really good in that board members have been allowed to express their thoughts, you know, representing the different thoughts of the community. And then as directions are only made through our votes, right? But that I appreciate that you're hearing those thoughts and then having that shape, you know, and because that is really what a relationship is all about. And so, so just kind of like, it seems like it's very, there's a definite kind of whose authority is and role. But I also encourage those who are thinking about the position that, like any relationship, it is a nuanced dance. And that, so far, I think it's been really working well under your leadership.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, let's move to the vote. Students?
Aye.
Aye. And directors? Aye. Okay, and with that, we find the board in compliance 2050. All right, let's move forward. Recognition and public input.
Great. I think we have members from our radio who are here and we need to move the tables. Yes, let's take a 2-minute, maybe recess. We'll take out tables and chairs and then we'll bring them in.
Sure, let's take 2 to 3. Let's come back at 6 o'clock. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Pretty nice, pretty. But it's the different.
Are you ready? We're back from recess and ready for recognition. Just sneak one in because as I was sharing with the PTA yesterday and then the schools foundation this morning. This is kind of the beginning of that time of year outside of some of the ends of athletic seasons when the culmination of a lot of work comes together. And that's this group tonight. I had a chance to be at the PTA's Reflections Award ceremony early February. And yesterday it was shared that I think, you know, our students made up 12% of all of the winning awards, but there were 8 students from our school district who are going on. Director Gloves, I think you're a proud father of one of them. And we'll bring some of the winners forward, but it's just a reminder of some incredible things that are happening. And that's this group here, who they were on the cusp of going to New York in 2020. And you were the last group we had, or you were the first group we had to shut down because of COVID, and you didn't have that chance to go to New York. And then you're back in action and back from a midwinter break trip. This is the KMIH 88.9, The Bridge group. We had 16 National Award of Excellence in Broadcasting from the Intercollegiate Broadcasting System winners. The annual Golden Microphone Awards were held during a live ceremony in New York on February 25th during midwinter break, and students from our very own radio station were in attendance. The Awards of Excellence included several awards for the station's wide-ranging news coverage, as well as Best Celebrity Interview, use of video and radio, sports coverage, and Best Specialty Music Show. Students were also recognized for their leadership and management roles in areas such as business, news, sports, and promotions. So with that, Mr. Bryan, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll honor these tremendous students.
Okay, well, I just quickly want to say thank you to the board and to Dr. Rundle and to Nick Wold and everybody who lets us do this. And I really want to give a salute to Natalie Wood. She's our community outreach coordinator, and she was in TV news for as long as I was in radio almost. She's a little younger than I am, but it's not a coincidence that we won a lot of news awards. Miles Alvarez won 4, and it's for community things, our Juneteenth coverage, the coverage of the International Dance for Peace for the city. Things like that make me really proud that there's a lot of community stuff going on, and these guys are just doing great work. As I've said here before, I have the best job in the world, and I'll turn it over to the students because they're the real stars of this thing.
And do you want to start maybe kind of who you are, what your award was, and what you're doing at the station?
I'm Andrew Howson. I'm a senior. You guys didn't know that. I'm the director of operations at KMIH, and I won Best Business Director.
I'm Sophia Zano. I'm a senior at KMIH, and I won Best Sports Director and Best Specialty Music Show.
I'm Miles Alvarez. I'm a senior, and I won Best Spot News, Best Community Outreach, Best News Director, and Best Political News.
My name is Sid Schropp. I'm a junior, and I won Best News Interview.
I'm Theodore Freeman. I'm a senior at KMIH. I'm the engineering director, and I won Best Specialty Music Show.
I'm Molly Rojas. I'm a senior, and I won Best Community Outreach Event with Miles.
I'm Annabelle Haggerty. I'm a junior, and I'm the program director at the station. I won Best Program Director.
I'm Jonathan. I'm a senior, and I won a Best Specialty Music Show with Theo and Sophia.
I'm Ellie Sadler. I'm a junior at the high school, and I won Best Celebrity Artist Interview and Best Liner Sweeper.
Congratulations to all of you. We're going to have you come around here, and the board will join you, and we'll have some pictures. Three, two, one. Okay, perfect. Wait, I think we have to pick them up. Parents, moms. Right now, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. I apologize. Just came back from our first badminton. We'll see you on Saturday. With that, we're gonna do public input for.
Oh, so we're, yeah. Okay, with that, I think we have some public input.
Oh, sorry, I have a couple more that I need to. So March is Women's History Month, and we sent out communication on this. March 8th, yesterday, was was International Women's Day yesterday. And so we're continuing to promote the tremendous accomplishments, but also contributions that women have made in the history of this country. And certainly both those who born in the country and also many who have immigrated here over the years. We also have Educational Support Professionals Week. That's coming up next week, March 13th through the 17th. This is a time in our state when we take some time to really think about all of the support professionals who impact our schools each and every day. I think since I've been in the district, we've also always made sure that that first week in May isn't just Teachers Appreciation Week, but it's every appreciation for all of our staff. Some of my opening commentary to the staff this year was reminding everyone that we're all educators. And that as bus drivers and nurses, speech language pathologists, counselors, those working in food services, ground maintenance, if someone ever questions whether or not they think it make a difference in the life of the child, call me, email me, and I will help to show exactly how that happens, because it takes everyone. And there aren't districts everywhere that have the number of support personnel that we do, who are extremely talented, dedicated, educated and passionate about this school district. So we honor them next week. Our full celebration is usually that first week in May, but be thanking all of those support personnel who make our district great. And then lastly, Ramadan will be starting this month for our Muslim neighbors and friends. That's April 22nd and 23rd, or excuse me, that's March 22nd, and then it will go a month, ending with Eid on April 22nd and 23rd. So that was also in my newsletter to the community as we continue to pay special tribute and recognition and providing space for our students and staff, as well as community members who celebrate different traditions and around faith and culture throughout our district.
Thank you very much. With that, we will move to public input. I believe we've got Isabel Fritas Perez. Hi, please, you can step up to the podium. I will quickly read the disclaimer and then you will have 3 minutes. Thank you for coming. This meeting is a meeting of the board and public. It's not a public meeting that guarantees interaction between members of the public and members of the board. When addressing the board at the meeting, please limit your remarks to not more than 3 minutes. Appoint a spokesperson if the concern is a group concern. And if desired, provide written documentation to the board's secretary. Public comments that name or otherwise identify a district student are not permitted without permission of that student's parent or legal guardian. As finally, the board may direct the superintendent to respond at a later date to the issues raised. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and please proceed with your public input, and 3 minutes is on the clock.
Great, thank you. Good evening. So what I'm bringing here today are just questions that I had when reviewing the demographics report that I believe you guys will be discussing afterward. And I'd love to, see if those questions will be answered, or if you're going to discuss those questions in your remarks, in your discussion. So one of the statements in that report is that declining area births and minimal residential development are the leading causes of declining enrollment in the school district. And when reviewing the area birth, I noticed the trend with the different, I think they want to go from 2014 into 2021, and we see that the area birth go up and down and changes, and they call right now that we have a 2-year declining trend. I'm not sure if I can call it 2-year trend, but we don't have 2022 data. So I think it'll be interesting to see if that data can be found, and we can look at what the birth rates were in 2022 to really understand if that's how much of that is a leading cause of those declining enrollments in school. In addition, in terms of residential development, the report talks about that, that 14 single-family homes generate about 7 K-12 students. I'll be interested to know what were the assumptions behind that, because their number seems low, but it would be interesting to know if this is a Mercer Island specific or it's national. And also, when we look at apartments, they talked about how 159 new apartments will build about 31 K-12 students, which also be interesting to know if it's a national data or it's specific to Mercer Island. If they look at our apartments right now and seeing how many of those kids are going to schools right now. It would be interesting because they talk about new residential development, but it would be also interesting to see if we have any data of resales and how many families are coming to the island buying used houses that are existent right now. And those houses, how many are families that will have kids sent to the area, because that may affect those numbers as well. So it'd be interesting to know about those assumptions and understand the data a little better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to read the report and bring your questions here. Definitely most appreciated. And we will have a lively discussion during that, so I'll reserve comment till then. Cheers. Let us, anything else, Michelle, for public input? Okay, with that, public input is closed. Let's move on to 4A, partial governance process monitoring. The demographics report.
All right, so let's go ahead and we have Scott. Yep. Brandon, do you have any opening comments before we turn it over to Scott or whatnot? This is a continuation. We have heard from our first demographer, EDS, with Les Kendrick, and we now have the report from Davis Demographics. So
I think with that, we should turn it over to Scott.
great.
Great.
Scott, welcome to our school district. Welcome in tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm gonna get the PowerPoint here going, and then we will, I'll share my screen. All right, just sharing the screen now. I don't have the ability to share the screen.
Should now.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, hello there and good evening. I hope you're all well. My name is Scott Terlucci with Davis Demographics. We've been, start out with just a little bit of history of us. We've been assisting school districts for over 30 years. I've been with the school with Davis Demographics. Feels like I've been with school districts for 30 years. I've been there for 27 years. We focus 100% of our work on K-12 demographics. We have a model that we've been using for that amount of time, and we've built our own software, and we've been able to help over 500 school districts throughout the US and Canada. We recently, within the last year, merged with MGT America, who has a huge scope of services available for districts, school districts, and higher ed. So one thing to note about our planning and the way we do our forecasts is that we do everything by residence, because we feel that actual school enrollments don't necessarily always reflect the area demographics. School enrollment is influenced by many non-spatial factors, and enrollment trends can change annually, while community demographics takes a longer period to change. An enrollment trend can change because a principal moved from one school to another, or a program moved from one school to another. But a actual changing of the community takes a little bit longer. This allows us to have and make any adjustments to facilities where the residents are and where the kids are. And it helps us with doing attendance areas. So we'll go to the next slide, or I won't. There we go. We're very data centric and data heavy. We do everything based on subjective data that we've collected, we've worked with, and we understand. We get a download of your student data, and we actually, what's called geocoding, we plot all of that student to their given address. With each one of those students, now we know where they live. On the left, you can see there is a heat map of those students, the distribution of where your students live. The highest density is up in the northern portion there, just that little bit. But the rest is pretty spread out evenly of where the students are. We create your attendance areas. This is showing your elementary attendance areas. And then we break those areas down into what we call study areas. Now, this allows us to focus our analysis on small geographic areas. We try to use streets, power lines, if there are rivers, anything that is easily identifiable to break those out. We try to keep neighborhoods together on these study areas. So now I can go in there and see what's happening in an individual study area. We can do analysis on that study area. We can do see where those kids are going. And if need be, as we're doing the forecast, we can actually apply, there's 77 study areas. We can apply a different factor to each of those 77 forecasts. Let me stop for a second. Are there any questions? Are we okay?
Sorry, we can continue.
Okay. So as I mentioned, there are 77 study areas. Our forecasts are based and calculated for each of that. And then when we do an elementary, that's just the composite of all of them together. We're based on the 2022-23 school data, and we've geocoded 4 years of historic data, 3 years, I'm sorry, of historic data. We move the students up, the grade, graduate the 12th grade and move up the others. So this is a normal cohort survival method, but it's influenced by geography and then by 3 major factors. First factor is future kindergarten enrollment. We're looking at area births for that. Secondly is mobility. This tracks the movements of students in and out of the district. We look at 3-year average, and it's the biggest influence on the forecast. And new housing. And that's we look at the occupancy of the housing based on the student yield factor. And I'll go into each one of these 4 factors a little bit more. So first is future resident kindergarten. And my apologies. I went to lean in and I hit the go button. So what we do is we assume that the 2022 students were born in 2017. We're using that as our base year. And we just look at the change from that 2017 births up or down and make that the 2020 and then use that to forecast what's going to be happening in the future, the next 4 years of births of kindergarten class. The kindergarten class is the hardest, the most difficult to forecast. Kids aren't in your system. We may not know where they were. These births are most likely not the same students that show up 5 years later. Not all of them, of course. There's going to be some turnover, et cetera. In this, we're seeing that 179 is the highest in a 4-year in that 8-year trends, with it also repeating in 2019. And then we see it actually down at the 160 level. We've kept it down at that level just because that is the trends in the area. That's the trends in the United States. And we've seen this continuing on. The next factor is mobility. Now, this is families moving in and out of the district. We look at 4 years of change, or 3 years of change, 4 years of data. So what this is looking at is that I'm comparing kindergarten to first grade for 3 years. So I'm doing 2021 kindergarten through have 100 kindergartners. In first grade the next year, you would expect to have 100 first graders. What this does is look at those 3 years of K1, 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 and to see how many you're getting in or coming out. In this case, if you look at Island Park, say, you're getting a 17% increase of students living in the Island Park area. Anything above 1, you're getting more students. Anything below 1, that means your students are leaving. This is where they're living. So that's why you have, like in Island Park, you have an 8th to 12th grade or 5th to 12th grade. You can see that this is actually showing where those kids are living. So it's regardless of where they're going to school, they're living there. What this is telling me is that this is a stability here. It's looking at all those students and it's seeing a lot are positive. The negative ones are just a little bit below the 1 mark. So that's not showing me a huge growth pattern nor a huge decline pattern. It's just showing a kind of a stability coming through. The K1 is normally higher because you have kids that don't go to kindergarten at your public schools, but will show up in first grade. You also see here, this takes into account if a house gets sold and a new family moves in, if that kid, there was not a student in that school, or in that house when the house was sold, and now there's a student there, this will catch those move in, moves out. We used to see, because I've been doing this for so long, students and houses grew up together. A new home would attract a young family. The family would put their kid in school. The child would go through all the system, the school, they would move out to bigger and better things. Then the parents would sell the house and another new family came in. We're seeing an older population where that turnover is not happening as quickly. That's something that's happening throughout the West Coast and throughout most of the United States, honestly. So this picks up anytime a home is sold and a new student moves in, or a home is sold and a new student moves out. This is what picks that up. And finally, new housing. The new housing is, we look at all the development, we talk to the district, we've talked to the city, and we've looked at, there's not just much going on. There's not a lot of room to do this. You're not going to get hundreds and hundreds of new development in the air. And what we do is we talk with them. The developments that we do have are both in the planning phase. We've got an idea when each of these units are going to be built, and we've factored that into the forecast. So for example, say with the 14 units, there's going to be about 7 students. Well, 7 students, that's factored into the forecast when those will be built, and it's factored over each individual grade and averaged over each individual grade. So there'd be less than 1 student per grade in the forecast. So these numbers here are showing that it's just not really going to affect the forecast very much because there's just not a lot of it. So what we're showing here is a district-wide forecast K-12. Again, this is showing the future resident kindergarten population will probably be about the level, a little bit lower than it was pre-pandemic. And because of an aging population and area births going down, we're probably going to see a decline in that K class, which would leave an overall decline. As I mentioned, the mobility trends are stable. There's, again, you're not showing a lot of growth or a lot of decline. It's showing stability, and the number of new housing is not going to significantly counteract the lower student-based population. Now, with that, we've also created 2 other versions of this, just kind of to make sure, okay, we know this is our normal model, this is our forecast. Pandemic has affected that and has done our models and, made our model a little bit, maybe we just want to look at something different. And that's what we've done here, just to make sure we don't miss anything and send you the wrong direction. So in version 2 and version 3, we use the district supplied student yield factor. In version 2 and 3, we've also added infill housing over the 10 years, about 50 a year, split evenly between single family and multifamily. Now, this is on addition to any new housing or any new students that would come from kids moving into the district. So the only difference between version 2 and version 3 is that in version 2, because as we're looking at that historic data, 2019 to 2022, we weighted towards the last year of change, the 21 to 22 year of change, which is, we think, more online to what is really happening. We don't have the big pandemic effect. That was version 2. In version 3, we only use the change of 1 year between 21, 22 and 22, 23. So in our opinion here at Davis Demographics, the version 2 is the most likely one that will actually happen. And this is just kind of showing that we've got these 3 forecasts, the first one straight model, and then 2 adjusted models. And version 2 is right in the middle. And I know I'm kind of hedging my bets by saying it's going to be right in the middle, but this is the one that makes the most sense. We've adjusted the mobility to a time frame that seems a little bit more in line with what's going to happen in the future. We've added a little infill, and we have a more specific student yield factor. So one of the other things we did was a school of choice analysis. This I always find to be a very interesting document. It really tells you where your kids are going. And it goes back to that very, second slide where I said there's sometimes a disconnect between where students live versus where they go to school. So if we look at the Island Park row, we can see there's 430 students living in that attendance area. Out of that 430 students, 365 are attending Island Park. 51 are attending Lake Ridge, 4 at Northwood, 8 at West Mercer, 2 at Islander Middle School. So that's telling you that they're spread out. They're not 100% all going to their school of residence. We look at down, we could see that there's 365 that live and go to Island Park. 3 live in Lake Ridge. I was going to say Laker Ridge, but I'm a Laker fan, so sorry about that. 5 are in Northwood. 4 is in our West Mercer. You've got 2 living outside the district. for a total enrollment of 379. Now, I find this interesting where, again, I mentioned that the demographics or the number of resident students don't necessarily match up with the number of students going to school there. Island Park has the most students living in their attendance area, but they have the least number of students attending their school as of this date. So it kind of, it shows that it's not a huge difference. You don't have a lot of kids moving and doing those transfers, but it does show that that's why we do it at the level of residents. I'm also going to talk a little bit here about the declining enrollment and what's factoring into that. It's not just the pandemic. It's not just the historically lower birth rates or the lower birth rates. It's not just the lack of development. It's just an aging population within the district and and just in general in the state, around the area, in the United States. This is happening. This is a presentation I've done multiple times. You are a unique and wonderful district, but you're not unique in this case. And one thing I always like to point out is you're not declining because of anything that is happening in the district. You're declining because the student base is getting less. And that's where the decline is coming from. It's not that they're not choosing to go to your schools. It's just they're not there to choose. So I think that's an important point. And this kind of brings that home. If you look at between 2019 and 2020, at the very bottom there, 12th grade, there was 340 12th graders. The next year, and I know it was a pandemic year, but the 225 in 2019 wasn't a pandemic year. There was 186 kindergartners. That's 154 less students just from nothing else other than graduating to 12th grade and bringing in a kindergarten class. Even if you went up and added 100 to that because of the pandemic, which we know is probably not the case, you're still 60 or 70 students less than what graduated out. That continues for the whole time frame. And if we're not at that above level or the 225, even if we are, we're still seeing these larger classes graduating out. In 2022, you have a 389 student class and 12th grade graduating. Again, even if you get back to 234 in 2023 or 250 in 2023 in kindergartners, that's still over 100 student decline. And that's what's happening throughout for each year. And what we're seeing is that with that mobility growth, that's very stable, where in the past you may have had more students coming into the district as they grew into it. I'm just going to take the 4 years for example, just straight off. From kindergarten in 2019 was 225. First grade was 229. Second grade was 222. Third grade was 237. 12 students over 4 grades increased. At that rate, it would never get up to 391 like we had before. So that's what's happening. It's a natural decrease in students. I also like to show and get a third-party data. This is data that I have nothing to do with compiling it. I've just taken it and overlaid it onto your district, onto your island, and looked at it. This is from a company called ESRI or Esri. They're the #1 data source for this sort of thing. And they take the census and do forecasts. Unfortunately, they still haven't finished the forecast for the 2020 census yet, but this gives you an idea of what, again, a third party is showing us that in 2010, there was about 5,000 school-age kids. In this case, I'm using from 5 to 19. I know it's a little bit off, but it gives you the idea. And 2022, they're estimating 49, 41, just a little decline. But by the time we get to 2027, they're forecasting about a 400 student school age decline for your island. Again, this is a completely third-party source, and it's just showing, it's mirroring what we're showing too. So my observations, my takeaways is that births are declining, and that will most likely lead to smaller K enrollment. Not a lot of new housing happening. That and even with adding 500 units over 10 years, we're still not even really showing much growth there. And 2 of the 3 forecasts that we did show a decline in student population, which we feel that version 2 would be the most likely trajectory. And it's been mirrored in a third-party demographic findings. So with that, I'm going to leave it to questions.
Any questions from board directors? One quick question around what was the district's applied student yield factor?
So that student yield factor came from the last capital facilities plan, where they actually surveyed all of the apartments to determine how, how many kids were coming out of each of those apartments. So, but I think it was like 0.09, or it was a very low number of what was coming out of multifamily. And certainly you have, more in some multifamily on the island and less in the other, but overall.
So you had one student yield factor for multifamily and another for single family.
Yeah, yeah, we used the numbers that were in that capital facilities plan.
Okay. Dan, any questions?
Yeah, I guess a couple questions. I mean, one, sort of looking back at the last 3 years, it's been a time of extreme volatility for many communities, in particular for Mercer Island, which is perhaps accelerated, but demographic changes that are already in place. And it's also been volatility in terms of students, housing prices, home sales, and now the lack of home sales on Mercer Island, particularly for a district that has historically seen a growth of over 100 students between kindergarten and senior year from an influx of people to the island. So I guess with that background, a couple questions. One is in deviating from a the standard model is just going to look back 3 years, which will have that volatility. But there was an exodus to some extent of students leaving like many districts during the pandemic for various reasons, some of which came back later and returned, and others which relocated, sought other options. To what extent, with even, taking a smaller sample size and the sort of more tailored or less standard models, the 2 and 3 with the district supplied data, is there confidence that that is actually selecting for the right trends? Or might it just be adding even more volatility by looking at a narrower time frame that sort of seesawed back and forth? And then I guess 2, historically, it seems that, projecting out 1 year, districts could do with a great deal of confidence. This year, and just looking at both our district, what neighboring districts are doing, at divergences between, your report, another report that we had commissioned, there isn't that level of confidence even of what next year is shaping up to be.
Yeah.
Which is all to say, I guess, one, can we say with any confidence that a non-standard model is any more accurate than a standard model? And then if one were to say, what the level of confidence is, just given those background dynamics, again, what's happening in our area nationally, would you say that's low, medium, high?
Okay, a lot to unpack there. Let's see here. So, yes, with the volatility, I'm going to speak to that first. Last year was very bad for us in trying to figure this out. This year, we're having a little bit more success. We seem to be honing it in. I understand what you're saying with the 3 different models, where the standard model plus the 2 versions. I tend to like the second model, the version there too. And the reason why, the way I'm feeling more confident in it is we didn't disregard 3 years of data like version 3. We just weighed towards a more, for lack of a better word, normal year. So that makes my confidence and weighted a little bit higher on that one, where we didn't treat the 2 pandemic years the same as the quote unquote normal year. We've now made the normal year the most important of the 3 years, but we didn't completely disregard those other years. So confidence wise, I think that's the best model we can do. I think when you're forecasting, yes, as you rightly pointed out, the next year is much easier than 10 years down the road. We normally have about a 98% accuracy for 1 year to 1 to 3 years. I'm not going to guarantee that for all districts, and I'm not going to guarantee that after 3 or 4 years, because we don't know what's going to happen there. But I do know the model is solid. We're basing our forecast on objective data that we can quantify.
Real quick follow-up. How frequently do you provide alternative projections based on district supply data? And does the 98% confidence rate apply across the board to customized demographic projections that you do on district supply data? Or is that with the standard model?
No, it is even with the district supply data, depending on the data. Specifically, when we're talking about student yield factors, I would say we create them about 50% of the time, but the other 50% will have a district source that's already created them. So we don't do any double work on that. We'll take what the district source is. And with that, as long as we've seen and we know and trust what is done before, it doesn't change our model for the student yield factors.
And the student yield factor is just with respect to new housing, is that
yes.
correct? And that's fairly trivial though, right, for our district?
It doesn't have a large impact at all.
So it's pretty much then based upon just the years in which, so when one's looking at the different models, that's not really being influenced by new housing. Because my understanding is experience, as Bellevue is experienced, and I think that we've experienced too, the yield is fairly minimal to de minimis. It's really then accounted for on just the look back period for student mobility, for explaining the different numbers.
Absolutely. I believe I mentioned that student mobility's got the biggest influence on the forecast.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. It's very helpful.
You're welcome.
I have a question. We had a public input speaker ask earlier this evening, and I think I know the answer, but I just wanted to kind of run by you. Like, she was asking whether, for example, when we look at projections based on, new apartment units, are the numbers that we come up with for, the number of like students yielded by, X number of new apartments, are those numbers specific to Mercer Island? Are those like a national average sort of thing? Are those based on like our, property values, income levels? Like how do you make that determination?
Yeah, these were taken from neighboring districts in King County. So we looked at a few different neighboring districts, and I don't have the exact ones right at my fingertips. But they're taken from surrounding districts for student yield. And to do it, it's actually kind of, let's see, it was Lake Washington and Renton School District.
In version 1, yeah.
And then that's for just the standard model. The version 2 and version 3 were from district supplied from Brandy.
And were those higher for the district supplied? compared to Lake Washington and Renton for the student yield factor?
You know what? I don't have the district supplied at my fingertips.
I think they were lowers.
I think,
Okay.
yeah.
Brad, the answer here.
Yeah, I think that's what was one of the first questions. And it's a really, we're not looking at house prices. Well, we are looking at house prices in the sense that we want to make sure we're getting similar houses to what's going to be built. But we really are just, this say project was built in the last 5 years, they're getting this number of students out of it. It's a very simple process. It's just a matter of delving down and getting those similar ones. But I want to really spend too much time on, because there's not that significant a number of new housing coming in, and it's not going to affect it one way or the other.
Yeah, we've spent some time looking at Bellevue's data, and other districts as well. Seattle too. Bellevue was interesting in multifamily homes. They were expecting 1 student per 40 multifamily, so 2.5 yield per 100 units. In practice, they said it was 1 student per 120 units in multifamily. So that corresponds to our data that we're seeing here too, which is the data Brandy gave you for multifamily.
Yeah.
For a single family, that's really up in the air right now. So an existing home is what that yield is. We've got a past yield. I think it was 7, you said, Brandy, per
I don't remember that.
per 14 houses. So I think that is what is up in the air. So what we heard from other districts as well, high home prices, low turnover of homes drove new children coming into the schools down. So same thing we see in Mercer Island. We see home prices now at $2+ million average. We see very high interest rates. We see home sales really tanked a couple of years ago, perhaps coming back slightly right now. Unclear where it's going to be in the future. Clearly with high interest rates, if people have locked in a mortgage at a low interest rate, it's unlikely you sell that home to go buy something at a high interest rate. So the expectation is that type of turnover on the island of existing homes will slow down, will be dramatically different than what we've seen before in a low interest rate environment. So I think that's what we're seeing in this data as well from Scott.
Absolutely.
And so the magic, I guess, for us as a school board to look at, clearly we've got 1 year of back to normal in terms of home sales. What you'd like to do is get a trend of 2 or 3 years of back to normal to see how that nets out in a high interest rate environment. What are home sales and turnover this year, next year, and the year after, to really make a strong decision one way or another. And so we as a district will be doing a lot of work in ambiguity to some degree. Our long-range facilities team, which will be looking at this data and analyzing this data and making plans, will be doing some of this work in ambiguity as well. So I think some of the key things we have to look at is some decision-making points that we'll have to make some real decisions on. Right now, we've got 4,000 kids in our school district. If our elementary schools fall to a certain level, say 1,200, 1,500, that's one set of decisions we have to make. That's a significant reduction in elementary school. And I think that's since it's new births coming in and home turnover, bringing those kids in, that's really the place we'll have to focus and look at. middle and high school, at least for the next 5 years, it looks like they'll be fairly consistent. Fairly the same size. The decreased enrollment is in K and 1 and 2. So that's kind of the analysis, I think, that I'm seeing coming back from this. And some of the analysis that us as a district will have to do as we right-size our staffing, right-size our building capacity to what's moving forward. Is that any other thoughts, Scott, that we should take into account for this?
No, I do suggest revisiting this annually, because as the trends do change and new things happen, there will be changes. But at this point, this is what all the data is pointing to is a decline in student population and student enrollment.
And you're seeing this regionally to the left and to the right, east and west of us.
This is a presentation I've made multiple times.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions from board members, students? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Let me just, okay. Brandy, do you have anything else to add, or we? Thank you very much, Brandy. We appreciate this. I will add, we've had, this has been super important. It drives a large chunk of our budget and our planning. We've had 2 demographers do this for us. We've looked at neighboring cities as well. Not that more data can potentially be paralysis, as much as it can be helpful. But we are seeing very similar trend lines right now.
I would just add that it's interesting seeing the input from the 2 different demographers, because this was a little more like seeing kind of like how the sausage is made. You know, so that was useful.
Yes, I agree. And 2 different perspectives of coming out with their projections. So thank you for making this happen. Brandy and Matt.
I really appreciate that he made the point that, enrollment is declining in the area, period. And that it's not anything anyone is doing. People are always going to make personal choices, as they should. And I really hope we can kind of move on from that. Obviously, the goal is to always make Mercer Island School District the best it can be. But I don't, so we're seeing every week a new district is announcing cuts or enrollment decline or school closures. It's just the time that we live in and what's happening in the region. So I just hope we can move towards really constructive conversations of how do we best make decisions with this in mind.
Thank you very much. Hearing no other comments from anyone, let's move on to 4B, student governance, students and governing boards.
Would you like us to start with our report, or would we like to talk about the changes that we made to for policy 1250?
Let's start with the report first. Yes.
First. Yes. So starting with the elementary school, as we've heard several times today, West Mercer 5th graders and Northwood is at Cedar Springs currently. West Mercer recently got their 5th grade sweatshirts on Monday. That's been really exciting. Lake Ridge 5th graders formed the Little Mermaid yesterday, which it's been good to see all 5th grade plays. And Lake Ridge recently started a newsletter run by students, which has been something we've been working on in our superintendent student advisory. And it was something of 5th graders that we're working on. Northwood recently had their Scholastic Book Fair, And the student council at Northwood is working to start an art club for students. Island Park recently had 2 meetings of the reinstated student council.
I feel like after, at the end of our meeting, we should have Dan, it's like, throw it to Dan to talk, update us at Cedar Springs, so maybe he'll do that. Since he's there in the action right now. At the middle school, students did a fundraiser for the Red Cross, to help with the Turkey, Syria earthquake. They raised over $919. Middle school band members also had their solo and ensemble this past Saturday, which we heard was a lot of fun. As a fun activity, all Gator Time classes are participating in the door decorating contest. I remember doing that when I was in 8th grade. It was a lot of fun. The middle school also had their reflections art competition ceremony. There were 24 awards in several different categories. The end of the trimester is also coming up, and we heard from a lot of 8th graders that they're excited for their last semester at the middle school.
Yeah, so the high school portion is just a big list of things that we're bragging about. But we have 7 national merit finalists, and they are Tong Lin, Sammy Blooming, Charlotte Woods, Rachel Sen, Elliot Gear, Miles Silverman, and Elliot Horton King. Amy Gay was recently named one of the 2 harpers in the country to get the prestigious National Youth Orchestra. She will travel with the orchestra and be performing around North America. Milo Metchin Miller won first place at the Seattle Shakespeare competition and will be headed to New York for the National Shakespeare competition. Boys Swim and Dive won their 3rd consecutive 3A state championship. We had 14 students qualify for ICDC, which is the International DECA competition. The national qualifiers for speech and debate were last week, and we had 5 students qualify for that, and that will be the week after spring break. Journalism recently went to the WJEA spring conference and came home with 4 awards. We are prepping for nationals, which is also right after spring break.
Asha didn't add this, but she won superior in a category. I don't know which one, but I heard from, which one?
News writing.
News writing. So, that's the highest honors you can. The MIHS band hosted East Shore Band Festival on the March 1st. Several bands attended, and we also heard from our band students that they had a lot of fun, as they always do. Our 13 spring sports have started, which creates excitement after midwinter break. We also have our spring assembly coming up at the end of March. ECAR hosted a market night, which has a lot of different local Asian-owned businesses, foods, games, entertainment, and more. Garrett Lee, one of the members of ECAR, said it was a massive success. Drama 2 is preparing for the last musical of the year, which will be Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah, so we wanted to add a quick section on Day on the Hill because Andrew and I had a great time. So 2 weeks ago, we went to Day on the Hill with Dr. Rundle and Director Larry. We had the opportunity to speak with some of our state representatives. We spoke about the importance of special education funding, transportation, and levy funding.
We had the opportunity to talk to the superintendent of public instruction. Well, like we were being talked to, but as well as the governor. We could ask them questions about education, and we could ask them what we felt important to them. They didn't answer our questions. They probably wouldn't have liked our questions. But it was great to also talk to a lot of other students. Students are around there in the entire state, so it's always nice to build those connections and talk to them about what they're doing in their districts and what problems they're facing. And we just overall really learned a lot about the decisions behind policies and bills, and learned a little bit about politics while at while talking about politics. Yeah, so it was interesting to really learn about it in the next level. It's something that you can't really understand unless you're there doing it. So thank you to Director Lurie and Dr. Rundle for letting us tag along.
Thank you.
I know. I think you tag along. So I was gonna say this during board reports, but I just wanna, because you guys are talking about this, I mean, our students took the lead and we met with our state legislators, all of them, and with other school districts because we share them with city boundaries. And they were, enamored with our students as well, allowing them really, it's their vision, it's their voice. And one of the messages, I think Andrew found a really amazing way of talking about special education and the reason for the importance of fully funding special education. And I think in a way that adults couldn't describe. I don't know if I said this to you, but when he was talking and advocating for our special education funding, he was talking about we want all of our friends to succeed. And he said it in that way. And to me, that was really moving. That, we don't need to compete. We want us all to succeed. And by referring to students who receive different services, it's they're still our friends and we want the best for them. And so thank you for bringing that perspective. I found it really meaningful. I think our legislators did too. And I think that, just in some demonstrates why hearing student voice is so important. So thank you guys for giving up the end of your break, even though I know you got a day off of school too. And, Audra made really good points too. That was just one example that stuck in my head. So now we'll just get you guys going to the NSBA in DC.
There you go.
Well, or at least auction, yeah.
Junior school board rep. Thank you for that. Any other comments?
Thank you for your advocacy.
You?
I was just gonna talk about 1250. So the biggest changes we made since last time we were talking about the letters of recommendation and the board policy. Andrew and I had a good discussion about it, and I think what we came upon was to have one reference letter from a district employee, and that can be any district employee, and then another reference letter from anyone of their choosing, and that could be a peer, coach, boss, spiritual leader, family member, or not family member, family member.
Yeah, we first talked about this in January and then got pushed back. So now March, and we liked what Director Din had to say about making sure we are able to keep it as equitable as possible for who, and as well as making sure people understand that there is, time and we want them to have good reference letters. And we think that this was a good way of achieving both of those. Any questions about the procedure? I know it doesn't have to be voted on, but.
No, but I like that solution because that really makes it flexible. So no matter what someone's situation is, they should be able to get those two letters from someone.
And I really appreciate that you still thought about the intent of why you're asking for this and think about what other ways we can do to still get your intent, to achieve your goals. But how do we reduce barriers for our students? So this has been really great intentional change to really support our students. So thank you for these changes.
Okay, thank you. This has been a long road. Thank you for all your persistence and taking back the feedback and actioning it in such a thoughtful way. So with that, could I have a motion to approve board policy 1250, students and governing boards?
So moved.
And a second? Okay, and with that, any discussion? And all in favor, students?
Aye.
Directors? Aye. Okay, against? And with that, we pass to 050 for board policy 1250. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Lovely job. Yes. Okay, let's move forward. Up here, sorry. Number 4, partial governance process and monitoring, board policy 1605, our annual superintendent evaluation. So thank you. This board, thank you, Fred. The board has gotten together do a summative review for the superintendent. This represents 6 months worth of work for the superintendent in his actual role. Much of what the superintendent does is written down as part of board policy. This includes our fundamentals as well as board policy 1800 operational expectations. These are reviewed throughout the year, and the results are recorded for posterity. And so that's included in the review. But you know, while those we pass them over very quickly in this review for the moment, this represents a great deal of work by the staff and by the superintendent. Accountability, leadership, direction, ensuring that the most basic of things are running well, from our budget to student academics, to our curriculum, to communication with parents, with board members, with students, with the community, our levies and fields, our budgets are all running well, is all included in this. And it's just summarized as a plus fail. So it's kind of very underwhelming response for so much work and a great deal of leadership. But thank you very much, Fred, for all that. When Fred came into this role, we started out with kind of 3 really big items that we wanted to think about. One was the superintendent communications plan. Around this was bringing in transparency, looking to see and understand our enrollment issues, looking to understand and see how we recover and move forward from the pandemic. So there was an incredible number of challenges, communication to students, parents, staff, about what we're going to do and how we're going to move forward here. So we really wanted to call that out as an admirable amount of work and as huge progress on that, so that our community and knows what we're working on as we're working on it, and what decisions we hope to make as a result of that. So our budget, our long-range facilities plan, all that type of work comes into play. Second big item was rebuilding our finance team. We had a huge, I mean, no doubt, COVID was a big disruption. It was a toll on all of us. We spent down into our fund balance. We had to take a $2 million loan to preserve our teacher jobs and the right environment for our kids to be able to return to school. And now with a new finance team, we have to rebuild and repay that. And along the way, we had administrators who had day jobs in legal and in special education, who came in and were our finance team in lieu of a real finance team who was coming in a few months later. So we very much appreciate the collaborative nature that Fred has created, the empowerment he has done to enable people to step in times of need, as well as doing their day job. So that was huge towards keeping our district running. Finally, facilities and transportation, having passed our levies last time around, again, overwhelmingly 70% plus, and then going ahead, taking community input, ensuring our fields were built, ensuring our theater and drama was done correctly, and updates made to that. Again, a tremendous amount of leadership and shown towards making big things happen to maintain accountability to our community and our students and staff. So thank you very much for those 3 huge items. It is most appreciated. sorry, with that, I will give opportunity for other board members to speak. I'll start with the students, if there's anything you'd like to add. And then move down.
I've just really seen, since the start of this, a lot of students appreciate the communication. I know a lot of students you've emailed this year, and they were surprised that if they emailed you, you gave them a quick response, you set up times to meet with them. You listened to their concerns, and most of all, I'm hearing from students that you're giving them different opportunities. And I really appreciate that. I've also heard from a lot of students that you were their principal, and they love seeing you around and saying, is he the principal of the school district now? I'm like, yeah, that's just about it. So I think students appreciate seeing you. It helps that a lot of students had you as a principal and love you as a principal. So now, as being a superintendent, they're happy that you're serving in that role. So thank you for really elevating the student voice, pushing Asha and I to elevate student voice and mentoring us. We appreciate the good work you've done, and we thank you for spending a lot of time working on good stuff.
Yeah, just to echo what Andrew said, I think a big thing is that Mr. Rundle or Dr. Rundle, he knows so many students' names. Like when I first got to Lakeridge, he knew all my siblings' names. And just knowing students by name just makes them feel so important. And so that's been really nice when he comes to the high school. I know he talks to a lot of students and they feel they can ask him questions about the district or all the stuff that's been happening with financials. They feel open and okay to talk to him.
Thank you. If anyone else, please don't, if anyone has anything else to add.
But I think like most leaders coming into during COVID, I think you inherited a lot of challenges. And I really appreciate that when you came in and then really providing the leadership to your team. But it is really your willingness to engage with the board and engage with the community, and how it's like not only willing to engage, but it seems like you really enjoy it, which is really super awesome, especially in our community. And how that recognizing that we are all doing this work together, we all have the same interest in supporting our students. And so seeing that, how you utilize the board as, like I said, thought partners and our communities as really resources and to work together, I think that's starting to build a lot of movement in the community to have a more of a feeling of investment in our school district. So I think that's really powerful during this time. And then also, I really appreciate the fact that you are, as we're doing this work, you know, when you do system change, there are so many gaps and holes, right? All systems and institutions have that. And I really appreciate your willingness to call out where the system gaps are and your willingness to like, how can we be better and hold yourself and the district accountable to some of like, how do we better serve our students and make sure there's better system integrations and more efficiency. And so, you know, because when we talk about that, sometimes people think that it's such like a downer and that things are horrible, but I think with your willingness to engage with, you know, with everybody, and we can't control a lot of the challenges right now, but I think that together, if we continually to crowdsource all of our really skills and resources, that I feel like we are really, as a district compared to other districts, I feel really confident that we're going in a really good path. And I really like what you said, Deborah, earlier. It's like, so I think as a board, and especially me, because I'm as a social worker, I'm always looking for disparities. You know, I'll spend 5 minutes, I'm patting your back, and then I'll spend the other like 55 minutes, I'm like, what's the problem? How do we make this better? And I think that's great, right? But sometimes when people are used to it, they're just like, oh my gosh, you know, this is such a so horrible. But I think how do we balance the fact that we focus on what we need to fix and then kind of take a step back and think of how awesome we are as a district and how of all the things that we're doing to support our students. And so as we're moving through this, I know there's a lot of challenges and kind of anxiety, but I feel really confident that we're gonna do the best we can and we're gonna come out ahead. and doing the best that we can for our students. So with that, I hope you, the rest of the administration, the faculty and staff, and our community balance the accountability and fixing the system, but also recognize that we have a super awesome district. And so kind of balancing that, work hard, but joy as well. And so I've been feeling a little bit of that. So thank you. And this is really a great pass-fail evaluation. Quality that part that we don't see here.
I thought you were a little nuts for wanting to stay and but obviously knew that you would succeed, and you know, the things that I saw is you know, just your commitment to this community, and it's an unusual thing to be well respected by all the different groups in the community, by students, by parents, by the staff. And you know, there's a reason why I think you've achieved that. And so I think that thank you for all of your hard work. I think transitioning from you know, not the ultimate decision maker to now being the ultimate decision maker. You know, it's been really fun to watch you come into your own, and you've never lacked confidence, at least in my experience with you, but to have the confidence to make those difficult decisions. And then also in the past, to have the respect to support the decisions that other people made. I think that's a really unique quality to be able to do both. I think that you set a great example for how we all should treat each other and listen to each other, and continuously reminding us all of the reason why we do this, and it's these guys here. So, you know, it's just been really fun to watch you interact with our students on field trips and different activities. So, you know, I could not be happier with where we're headed, and appreciate your hard work and dedication. Thank you.
Well, this is the part where you have to sit and not be embarrassed while we all say nice things. Yeah, last year, or the last couple of years, Superintendent Kolosky used to talk a lot about building the plane while flying it at the beginning of COVID, right? And that's really not been your task. I feel like your task since becoming superintendent has been to like keep the plane flying. The plane was flying, keep the plane in the air while clamoring around outside the plane, making the plane better, like outside and inside, which is like harder than it seems, really, actually. There's a famous Robert Kennedy quote where he's like, some men see things as they are and say why, I dream of things that never were and say why not. And I kind of had that in my head as David was talking, not because that's exactly how I see what you're doing in the district, but I actually think of it more as like, it's very easy for people to say like, change is really hard, or change is too hard, or like change will be a really long time coming. This might change in 2 decades, you know? And I feel like your attitude since assuming the superintendency has been very much like, is this change worth doing? Like, okay, it's worth doing. Like, how can we get it started? Like, you're not shy about like getting things rolling, even if it's just like a partial change leading to another change the next year and another change the year after that. And I really welcome that. I'm really grateful for that. And I hear the same thing like from students at the high school. Like I used to get, you know, kind of frantic emails from students at the high school, and they were like, I'm really upset about this thing. What can I do? And I'd be like, well, you can let the superintendent know, you can talk to your principal, whatever. And they're all like, oh, like he got back to me right away. Like I got an answer, you know? So that's, you know, thank you for everything that you're doing. And your staff.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, to echo what others have said, being a superintendent of any district is difficult. I think, particularly given the context of when 6 months ago, or just last summer, that you came into the superintendency was particularly difficult. But you opened the door, and that's the first step, and have taken concrete actions to put the district in a better place, and we'll hear more about it in the coming months. There's still many difficult decisions ahead, But I remain optimistic that as long as the door remains open and engage board members, the community, the staff, students in dialogue, that we have a bright future ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. And as part of this as well, I'd just like to echo how important our administration team is to the district. As we've heard here, at a leadership level, even though Fred does not work daily with students, he's obviously not in the classroom. As an administrator and as a leader, he has direct impact onto the well-being of our students. And I'd say this applies to all our administration. Whether you're a principal, you're a coach, you're the chief of finance, you're with HR, even indirect actions have direct implications to our students. So we appreciate and recognize the importance of administration towards the well-being of our school. One clear thing we hold our superintendent responsible for is ensuring competitive pay for our classified and certificated, as well as our administration, as administrators. So that's very important for us. We've spoken often about the expectations that we have around teachers, our bus drivers, our custodial staff, our groundkeepers. But we also have expectations for our administration in their leadership and ensuring how they're improving the system. We've talked here about systemic change and driving systemic change through leadership and through actions. This systemic change clearly doesn't happen organically. It requires effort, it requires strategic thinking, it requires real work to get the most out of people and most out of teams. So we appreciate that work from throughout the administration. During COVID, administrators was responsible for the leadership to enable our most vulnerable students to get the transportation to school, as well as ensuring teachers or substitute teachers were in our classroom during COVID. Our leadership was responsible for doing the work to log in and allow our schools to be reopened in a timely manner so that we could do in-person schooling during COVID. Again, this type of work does not happen organically or automatically. It takes leadership. Our finance and administration decided around how to best spend our fund balance. We entered in with a high fund balance, 8 to 10%. That was spent to retain jobs, to create the best environment for our students when they had to be socially distanced. And then when the need was necessary, we spent into fund balance, and we also did a additional $2 million loan from our capital fund. Very, very difficult decisions for leadership to make. And now leadership is accountable for repaying this. This burden is not on individuals, not on the community, not on teachers. This burden is clearly on leadership and administration to make this right again. As we've considered issues like enrollment, declining enrollment, what's the cause for it? Again, those type of burdens fall on administration and leadership. Throughout SIPs, how are we systemically improving our schools? How do we think about all the different cultures we have to incorporate into our school discussions? Again, being driven by our administration staff, our leadership. As parents are concerned about the work we do, we've had parents concerned, are we crossing lines with the way we do Black Lives Matter, or the way we look at a religion, or the way we look at other holidays, or the way we look at school calendar? When those type of issues come from the community, it's our administration who takes the leadership to find the best solutions. And in many cases, our administration also has to say no to very difficult things, as well as having the joy of saying yes. So we respect that leadership and that administration from our administration. So many, many more things I'll go on. I could go on with. I will not. I will just say this is amongst the primary reasons that in our consent agenda today, you will see that we are giving and passing on raises to our administration. They're in line with the same raises and same raises we gave to general, to our certificated and classified staff. As a board, we've been through the budgeting and financing process before. We know as a board that we have to have competitive pay for all our employees. And we think about this all the time, irrespective of which group we are bargaining or discussing with. The whole system has to be solvent, has to work within a budget that is full of legal issues and other encumbrances from the state. So thank you very much, Fred, and to your team for all the work you have done in this space.
Well, thanks for that awkwardly humbling and energizing period. I want to first just thank each of you for recognizing the staff and the administrators and everyone else around who really makes it all happen, because it is never about one person. It's never about one board member, one superintendent, one principal, one teacher, one bus driver. It's a culmination of all of them to get students like Andrew from kindergarten all the way through his senior year. And, that's the ultimate work, is that we're all after. And I feel like entering in, there were certainly some great foundations to jump from. But yes, we've had challenges and we still have those challenges ahead. I think, illustrating the one that you just did, President D'Souza, trying to figure out how to retain and attract the very best people for our organization, whether or not they are classified or certified or administrators, especially in the situation we're in, is definitely challenging. And, I know you received some mail recently and some input about, what that looks like for administrators, and, going back to our budget presentations, and had a chance to have a good conversation today with my colleague and the MIEA president. But just remembering that those raises since McCleary have definitely been far less for our administrative team. And, it's not about trying to put people above or below, but we've got to make sure that we get as many people who want to be part of our school district as possible. That being said, I was talking to, Director Battersby and Director Sullivan today. We were having a conversation, and I had kind of a principal mentor when I first became a principal tell me, and I respect him greatly. He's gone on to be a board director, and this is in Colorado, but that you can either have great relations with the students and the parents, or the students and the staff, or the parents and the students, but you can never have all three. And I've made it my mission to always try to defy that. And that it cannot be without all three together. It has to be the staff and the students and the parents. And I think we work tirelessly trying to do that each and every day that we're coming here. It's always felt funny that I'm trying to make our district way better than Issaquah's, where my kids are. But this has always been home, and I loved being a teacher. I still am a teacher, but from that formal sense, I loved it. And I loved being a principal. And I think I thought I loved being a director and assistant superintendent, but I think I just liked those because I love this a lot more than that. And, I think it's because the people we have around in our district and the opportunities I get. So plenty of work ahead. 6 months in is hardly a marker to say that I've achieved anything, but I think when we continue, and as you said, Director Glowitz, keep the door open, keep the conversations going. Know people can reach out. I told our PTA yesterday, if we have any parents who are friends, neighbors, considering leaving the district, or should I bring my kids back? I have meetings set up. I've had them this week. I have them next week. We have administrators who are meeting with people because At the end of the day, none of this exists without the two individuals across the dais here and everyone you represent. Because these schools are for you, these are community schools. We just get the great fortune to be here each and every day working. So appreciate you giving me a chance and hiring me a year ago. Maybe it was crazy or whatnot, but it's a lifestyle that I like. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to our team and teachers, everyone behind this. So thanks.
So with that, could I have a motion to approve the superintendent's summative evaluation, please?
I move we approve the superintendent's summative evaluation.
And the second? Second from Tam. With that, all in favor, students?
Aye.
And directors? Aye. Against? With that, we have 2-0, 5-0 passage for the superintendent summative. Let's quickly move on to consent agenda. With that, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
And seconded by Maggie Ty. All in favor, students?
Aye.
And directors? Aye. With that, any against? 2-0, 5-0 passage for the consent agenda. And superintendent announcements.
Just the only one is Saturday. Everyone's welcome to attend our ribbon cutting. Asha and Andrew will be the leading the charge. They will be in charge of facilitating the event and leading the way. If you do plan on attending as board directors, if you wouldn't mind just texting Director Lurie or myself, just so we know to be looking for you. We don't need a notice or anything. It's not an official meeting, but if you are going to be there, let us know so we can make sure that we recognize you. It'll be a great day with students honored and celebrated. Great day, as I keep telling people. We've never been able to host the 16-team jamboree because we just didn't have the facilities. And our team, our softball team gets to host and be really proud of their facility and where their home is. So excited about that.
Thank you. Move on to the legislative report. Deborah.
I kind of said what I was planning on saying about the legislative conference and Day on the Hill. So it's just a great, it's a great opportunity to watch our students advocate and watch our legislators interact with our students. Obviously, adults can't help but talk too. So there's a little bit of that, but we tried to keep that to a minimum. The special education bill is extraordinarily not what we thought it would be. So it's a pretty big bummer. Things could possibly change. Senator Wellman's really, she was as frustrated as we were when we met with her, and she still seems to be wanting to lead the charge to get it turned around. So, advocating for that is definitely a good thing. If anyone is interested in advocating, what I know she has said to us before is, give a personal story, the form emails just aren't as meaningful. Even if it's a couple sentences of here's how it impacted me, it matters a lot to her, and also to kind of help renew her energy to continue fighting on our students' behalf. It's really a bummer about the flooding.
The one good news on that, I've been texting a little bit with one of our lobbyists here in the meeting. I haven't paid attention. The indication is while it didn't make it out of rules, there's a lot of people who are saying they're not sure how the budget even gets implemented, because this is going to be a deemed necessary piece, and so that it's likely going to be coming back up. We need to continue talking to our legislators. We need to continue pushing on that, but at least some of the indication is that this is going to be a critical issue to get the budget even passed. So it'll probably come back around, but we'll keep pushing forward. So
yeah, so the way, just a 2-second synopsis is while the bills while it's closed, you can't bring up anything new, and anything that hasn't gotten to a certain point can't be, dies. But if something's deemed necessary to implement the budget, it can be. So these are all, when it's paramount duty, there seems to be a lot of voices from the other side of the aisle, which is unexpected about paramount duty. So hopefully that will, matter. So that's all I was gonna say, is, I'm continuing to listen to the legislative updates every week. Yeah, there's just, not, as things are noteworthy and newsworthy, I'll let you know, but we're just kind of waiting and seeing how they end up.
Thank you for staying on top of all the sports, Deborah.
Yeah.
And with that, let's move to announcements, inquiries and reports. Dan, any status report from Dan?
Still in the thick of it, one night down, one to go. Being one of the cabin leaders for fifth grade boys for sleepaway camp is always entertaining and interesting and keeps you on the toes. It's been good. And maybe the next board meeting, I can share a handful of photos of some of the more unique and growth building opportunities that something like fifth grade camp that we're able to offer in our district is able to provide.
Thank you very much for your duty, Dan. Parents everywhere are grateful. I am very sure.
Especially when you're the dad of a daughter and you have to be the chaperone for a bunch of boys.
I have nothing at this point. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Students?
Aye.
Against, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. for your participation.
Yeah.
When I have talked with